much in 2 decades to create a single shared currency. Now, it's called the ECO. If it works, one currency could be used by nearly 400 million across the region. But with economies as different as Nigeria and Sierra Leone, the big question is, can they really share the same money?
All right. Welcome to This Week in Africa, your weekly live stream where we talk about all things Africa related. Apologies for the delay, some slow starts this morning, but for those of you who are just joining, give us a thumbs up and let us know that you can hear us and let us know where you're watching from. Today, we are talking about the new ECO, ECOWAS's new currency that is supposed to launch. We have some other discussions about things happening in Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Uganda, and other parts around the continent. Before we get into today's stories, we like to start with introductions. So I'll turn it over to my co-host to introduce herself before I introduce myself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gloria Ayo, co-host of This Week in Africa with Authentic African. And I'm also the creator of Diaspora Station. Basically, what we do is we try to bring everybody throughout the African diaspora together through news, history, and culture. But always happy to be back here because I get a chance to stretch my analyst muscle on this show. So it's always fun and it keeps me in tune with what's going on currently on the continent. So good to be back.
Absolutely. And I'm Joe Hatago, founder of Authentic African Media. Our goal is to help people do one of three things: visit, move, and or invest in the continent of Africa. We're also working to bridge the gap between those living on the continent and those living in the diaspora. We do these weekly live streams to keep those who are interested in the continent informed in what's happening on the continent in real time, especially if you're planning to do one of those three things: visit, move, and invest. It is good to know what's happening around the continent. So with that, we will get into today's major headlines. So as mentioned in the first clip you saw, West Africa is looking to introduce a shared currency called the ECO, something that many of you have been asking about and asking for. And, many of us who care about the continent have been asking, why hasn't there been? As we know that there's a European Union and there is a euro in terms of currency. And on the continent of Africa, there's an African Union, but there is no African currency. And we're looking to see, there are some currencies that operate cross borders in some countries in Africa, but generally currencies are specific to a country, unless it's the CFA franc, which France has imposed on former colonial former countries that it colonized. So outside of that, we don't really see too much of a shared currency. We see Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger working on something as well. But that's the one that kind of everybody is looking at to see who else is going to do something similar, if not just have the entire continent operate on one currency. So ECOWAS seems to be moving in that direction. So they're aiming for the implementation by 2027. The central bank governors from 12 African countries, West African countries, that includes Nigeria, Ghana, others, Sierra Leone as well. Many of them met in Liberia to accelerate progress. Success could facilitate trade among nearly 400 million people, 200 plus million of them being in Nigeria, by reducing conversion fees and exchange rate uncertainties. Of course, there are some challenges like economic disparities. Obviously, Nigeria faces inflation issues. Ghana had debt issues. They're trying to clear some of that debt. The launch may need to occur in stages with certain countries eligible initially and other ones have to be eligible later. Currently, the US dollar actually predominates trade between these countries. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but let's see more from this video and then we'll have some more commentary on the other side.
Central bank governors from 12 West African countries met recently in Monrovia, the capital of Liberia. After years of delays, they say they want to speed things up. The target now is to make the ECO a real currency by the year 2027. If launched, the ECO would then let countries trade using one shared currency. That means fewer conversion fees, less uncertainty from exchange rates, and easier trade between neighbors. Now, the talks were held under the Regional Bloc Economic Community of West African States, also known as ECOWAS, and the focus was simple: get countries to align their economic rules and make their financial systems work together.
So, Gloria, your thoughts on a shared currency across the ECOWAS nations in this regional bloc?
Yes, thank you very, very much, Joe. So the primary driver, obviously, as you referenced, is to help shield West African economies from the U.S. Federal Reserve policy shocks. And as we know, there's been a lot of weaponization of the dollar, not just in Africa, I mean, throughout, when you talk about global trade. So having a regional currency would help encourage things like intra-regional trade. That way people are able to trade locally. And, we've always been advocates for Africa being self-sufficient, Africans relying on Africans, regionally and things like that. This would help lower transaction costs. It would help reduce the constant pressure on national foreign exchange reserves. So in theory, brilliant idea. But something happened in 2019 where Ivory Coast and France announced that the CFA franc would be renamed the ECO. And countries like Nigeria and other English-speaking nations actually saw this as a hijack of the regional project and basically a way of France trying to preserve its influence, kind of like rebranding, changing the name and all. So there were strong reactions to that. It's also important to note that the ECO has missed launch targets. This isn't the first time we would hear about the ECO. There was a launch target in 2003. There was one. They've had a series even as recently as 2020. And the reason they couldn't move forward was because member states were unable to meet what you call convergence criteria. And these criteria are very strict. I mean, you have to have things like low inflation. Your government has to have limited deficits. You have to have restricted central bank borrowing, and your foreign exchange reserves have to be healthy. And it's also important to to note that Nigeria, giant of Africa, represents roughly 60 to 70% of the region's GDP. So basically, it's looking like this will be a Naira plus currency. But you have nations like Togo or Benin fearing that this policy would affect them, because now anything to do with their needs would be dictated by the Nigerian economy. It's sort of like what happened in the Eurozone with what they call the Germany problem. How it felt like Germany had to control, you know what I mean? So that's their concern regarding that. And I completely get it. In all of this, and I heard reference to the AES from you, Joe. I do like that you referenced that, because as we know, the AES, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger withdrew from ECOWAS in 2025. And they've been pursuing their own Sahelian monetary sovereignty. So the remaining ECOWAS members are left alone to pursue their own ECO while the AES takes care of its own. Hopefully there's less political friction. I mean, you can't even, at this point, I don't think you can penetrate the AES. I mean, they're so strong and it's been working for them, right? So now it's like, which I think is just quite an irony, but it is a reflection of what's going on in that region. And just last week we talked about China's zero tariff deals for Africa, and we know about the BRICS expanding. So if West Africa has its own unified currency, it would actually make the region more formidable within the global South. So that helps. And, because again, there are conversations around the dominance of the dollar when you talk about global trade. So I think this could really position us there. But hopefully it's not just yet another, target, and then we don't hear anything about it for a couple of years, and here we are having the same conversation. We need progress. But I think most importantly, I look forward to the day that the African currency is truly independent of European and American oversight.
Yeah, agree 100% with that last statement, especially. And so, yeah, I mean, and I can just give some anecdotal insight into what this looks like on the ground trading between countries. So I have a couple of friends who buy products in Nigeria, and the conversion between, well, first of all, many times the currency is unstable in many of these countries in West Africa individually. And many times you compare it to the dollar. So even when I was paying one of my social media managers, she had always requested that she got paid in Nigeria. And when I was on the ground, and I'd have to go to a guy who was a Nigerian living in Sierra Leone who had cash in Nigeria. I'd go pay him currency in leones, like Sierra Leone leones. We'd have to do the conversion, match it to the dollar, see what the dollar to Naira conversion rate is, the dollar to Leone conversion rate, and then we do this kind of conversion and then say, okay, this is how much my social media manager in Nigeria would be getting. And it's just way too many steps you have to go through when really there should be a shared system and a process. And that kind of difficulty doing business between the two countries obviously leads to the lack of people being inspired to do so, right? It's just that simple. When you have that many challenges, you already have local challenges, right? Starting a business. Now, if you want to operate outside of your domestic region into even a bordering country, there are challenges. Sierra Leone borders on a country that operates or did operate with the CFA franc, borders on another country that has another currency. If you want to do business with other countries, it always had to go back to the dollar conversion, then converting to their currency. It is just very, very challenging. And then eventually what we ended up doing was just something completely different just to get away from that. But basically it was me sending money from the US there because we already had to change to the dollar anyway. So we might as well start from the US and sending it to Nigeria. So imagine me being in Sierra Leone, Nigeria is here, and I'm sending money from the US to Nigeria, right? And so, it just doesn't work. And those are some of the things holding back inter-country trade. And to your point about the dominance, one of the things that people in Europe were complaining about, especially the UK, was Germany's dominance, right? As you mentioned, but it was because they were the biggest economy. Germany obviously has, I think, aluminum underground. They actually have some minerals, and they have engineers that produce things, right? Vehicles, etc. So the rest of Europe kind of had to rely on Germany's production in order for a lot of Europe to be able to stay afloat. Really, not every country required it, but it was useful, and that's why so many of them stayed in, and that's why the UK many people are considering trying to get back into the European Union because Brexit didn't work out so well for the UK. So back to Africa, right? On that note, yeah, I think that there is probably going to be some contention and some points of contention, some fear around being tied to a country with a GDP that large, and of course a population that large, because I think more than 3/4 or close to 3/4 of West Africa's population is in Nigeria, right? And so. But at the end of the day, that is one of the risks that you take when you start a regional currency. And I just think it just requires everyone to operate with all the rules that said and work together. Other people have been able to make it work. So hopefully West Africa can too. But I to your point though, there's obviously an example directly to the north. So they can potentially follow that example and see what they're doing. Because it's everything that they're doing there seems to be working so far for their people. And so hopefully this is another thing that they take into consideration. All right, so that is the ECHO. Those of you who are more interested, there's a link in the description to discuss this more. Now on to Burkina Faso. So there were two stories we wanted to talk to in regards to Burkina Faso. And I actually, one of them was in regards to the gold in Burkina Faso and how that has helped them pay back debt to, or get a new loan from the IMF. I just want to pull that up because I actually realized that that story is not already fully, okay, here we go. Sorry, give me a second. Let me just get that up and we'll play that on screen. But while we do, let me give you guys a little background on the story. So Traoré's gamble on gold is starting to yield returns for Burkina Faso's military government, which is benefiting from a significant mining boom. The country recorded a record 94 tons of gold production in 2025, which we talked about previously, enhancing revenues and unlocking a $33.2 million disbursement from the IMF following a positive economic review. So let's play a video which speaks about this, and then we'll have some commentary on the other side.
I can't hear it. Is there audio? Can we hear it?
So it sounds like you guys can't hear. Sorry. It seems to be happening from time to time. I can hear it on my side, but you guys can't hear it. You guys heard the sound in the first video, right? Just not the second.
I didn't hear you.
No. Okay. I think I see what's happening. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So this has happened from time to time, and I don't know why this is happening, but for some reason on the screen share, it is not, the audio is not coming through. So let's try this again. Apologies, guys. I didn't realize the video was playing for a little while and you guys could not hear. Let me get back to sharing the tab. Let me know now if you guys are, can you guys hear me right now?
I can hear you.
Okay, so now let me press play and let me know if you can hear the audio now. Let me just.
Gold gamble is.
Were you able to hear this?
Ibrahim Traoré's gold gamble is starting to pay off. Burkina Faso's military government is riding a mining boom with record production, rising revenues, and fresh international funding now flowing into the country. The Sahel nation has just secured a new funding of more than $33 million from the International Monetary Fund after a positive review of its economic program. On paper, that number is modest, but in global finance terms, the approval acts as a signal that Burkina Faso's economy still meets international standards despite an ongoing security crisis.
All right, so your thoughts on this story, Gloria?
Yeah. Okay, so two things came to my mind when I saw the headline. Obviously, Traoré, who was initially, I guess, sidelined, or they thought they could sideline this man and go against him, he's been able to actually champion resource nationalism, which is one thing we want throughout our continent, where we can take control of our own resources. And we know what, how beautiful gold has been for Burkina Faso. I mean, the gold has always been there, but now we really get to see it and talk about it, because prior to that, our gold was going out of the continent, or at least in Burkina Faso it was. And part of, and this is why when people talk about the military taking over, and some people say, oh yeah, but it's a dictatorship. The advantage of that has been that it seems it looks like the government is in fact working for the people. And this is why people rally around the AES. We've seen even the Burkinabés coming out to support Traoré because they're seeing their government actually working for them. So for the IMF of all institutions, because at the end of the day it's business, right? For them to see that, oh wow, they've actually satisfied their, they have enough fiscal discipline to meet our program review, whatever the requirements are for that, let's give them this loan. So it's definitely confirmation that Traoré is doing something right. Now, the other side of it, one person who came to my mind when I saw the headline was Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara famously and fiercely was against borrowing from the IMF and the World Bank. I mean, he has famously talked about how whoever lends to you is going to end up colonizing you. Whoever feeds you is going to colonize you. They're going to have so much power over you. I'm just paraphrasing here, but that's essentially what his message was. So he was not a fan of borrowing from these institutions. And we all understand why. These institutions have not proven throughout history and even in recent history that they're friends of our continent. So there are reasons why people like Sankara were very skeptical, and why even today you have citizens who are concerned about that. So that for me was like a contradiction. But in fairness to Traoré, he's been forced to look south to secure vital trade routes because there have been attacks in the northern and eastern regions. And he's not necessarily trying to go against what Sankara stood for, but because, and the reason I'm giving him a pass is because he's actually in a state of total war, to be fair. So they need cash for equipment. They need food stability. And I hope, it's just properly managed. I trust that it will be. I'm not a fan of borrowing from these institutions, but I guess we'll just keep an eye out and see how this works out. 33.2 million is relatively huge, but let's see, perhaps they see it as a necessary evil to keep the economy from collapsing while they fight this insurgency.
Right, all good points. And, I expect that they'll be able to pay it back considering, what they've been able to do in the sale of that gold, right? I mean, you don't necessarily get those loans unless they expect to pay them back. And as you said, it's probably based on immediate needs, right? And so to that point, there was a story that we won't get a chance to cover today just in the interest of time, but something that may be covered on a later live stream. But obviously a few deals are happening, right? They're making some deals with Iran for certain elements. They're also making a deal with Ghana. 7 actual trade deals have been made with Ghana. And so, they basically, we talked about this on Monday on a separate live stream, but there was an attack on tomato farmers in Burkina Faso from Ghana. And so the two countries have signed 7 agreements focused on joint security measures, streamlined trade processes and new governance initiatives. So the bilateral cooperation, which had been dominant for some time, is now crucial amid rising instability in the Sahel region, emphasizing the economic and security dependence of both nations. Obviously, also, Ghana is a country that is on the ocean, right? And so, trade routes are also going to be really important as part of those discussions. So to your point, I think what Ibrahim Traoré is doing is being creative and finding as many options to continue to build on economic sovereignty. Yeah. Do you want to speak to this statement about the Iran?
Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. I just put it up because that was right in, obviously, to your point about Iran. I didn't get to mention Iran, but yes, they definitely are it's going to be a game changer. I have my reservations, but again, it's all about who's the better partner. So I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, we don't have time to get into the story of Burkina Faso and Iran, but obviously you guys can do some research on that. We share a lot of videos from different pages, so if you're interested in that, a couple of even First Post Africa has, I think, reported on this. So if you want more insight into that, check that out. But yeah, so moving on to another country in the West African region. We're moving to Nigeria now, and on the talk of insurgents and challenges with these paramilitary groups, Nigeria has reportedly paid millions of dollars in ransom to Boko Haram. So they're under scrutiny now, Nigeria's government, following allegations that it paid a massive ransom to secure the release of nearly 230 students and staff kidnapped from the St. Mary's boarding school in central Niger State. Now, while National Security Advisor insisted that no money exchanged hands, investigative reports suggest millions of dollars were exchanged in release of those students. So we will play a video and have some commentary on the other side.
A question has stirred controversy in the country. Did Nigeria pay ransom to Boko Haram terrorists to free kidnapped children? Well, that is what the media reports are saying. Back in November, Boko Haram terrorists kidnapped nearly 300 children and staff from St. Mary's boarding school in Papiri in central Niger State. Around 50 managed to escape the kidnappers.
We heard gunshots in the school. They came carrying children. We saw them leaving. They put the children at the front and the back of motorcycles, and then they left.
Now, after 2 weeks of negotiations, the terrorists freed children and teachers. Nigeria's National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, led the negotiations, and the government insisted that no ransom was paid. But media reports suggest otherwise. The Nigerian government has reportedly paid a huge ransom to free the kidnapped children and the staff. The ransom is estimated to be worth millions of dollars.
All right. So, Gloria, your thoughts on the ransom being paid and the denial of the ransom being paid?
Oh, I have thoughts, Joe. I have thoughts. We've said it time and time again, or at least I have. I'm Nigerian by heritage and obviously very passionate, really about anything to do with the continent. But because obviously that's my home, it gets really sensitive. And because I've lived in that environment, matter of fact, at some point, sorry guys, I'm digressing a bit, but at some point I did relocate back to Nigeria. And I think that was necessary for me. I was in legacy media then. I think that was necessary for me so I could see things firsthand. So when it comes to Nigeria, I get perhaps even far more passionate than I should. Because it's just so sensitive. This story, the AFP has a reputation of putting things out that are confirmed to an extent. And when you have stories being shared by an organization like the AFP, it definitely gets a lot of attention. Now, estimating between 2 billion naira and $7 million, estimating that was flown by helicopter to some part of Borno State is, I don't want to say it's unsurprising because, one question we kept asking was, okay, now you've released the girls. My concern was these girls were released because of all the tension globally, with Trump's attention on Nigeria, all the noise he made around Nigeria's security and, the Christian genocide claims and things like that. And, that was a Catholic school. So was that PR? Because these attacks continue. They keep going on, Joe. We've talked about this. I mean, it's only so many we can even cover. you open the news, something is happening somewhere. You know, communities are being hunted down, razed down, people's lives, you know, being taken. And the big question on everybody's lips was, okay, so now you've released the girls. Where are the people who took them? Do we not have enough intelligence? I mean, didn't we go rescue some president from a neighboring country not that long ago with the help of France? But we can't get these terrorists. We can't end this insecurity. And that's why I kept asking the question, is there something the Nigerian government knows that we don't know? Is there something going on with these, what they call bandits, but we know they're terrorists? What is it that's going on? What is the deal they have that we're not aware of? Because how do you release these girls and we don't know how, nobody was held accountable? But anyway, another revelation was that 2 senior Boko Haram commanders were actually released in exchange for the hostages. But of course, the Nigerian government has flatly denied the reports. They call them fake news. They insist that the release was as a result of operational precision. What operational precision releases girls and you don't get any of the terrorists and you say that was precision? What is so precise about that? Right. You know, but you know, obviously there's a lot of contradiction. And I guess the big elephant in the room is that there is a law. Nigeria's 2022 law criminalizes ransom payments with up to 15 years in prison. A very unfair law. You're not protecting the citizens, yet you criminalize families for doing what they have to do. If, God forbid, your family members were held hostage, wouldn't you pay? I'm saying that, I'm asking the same government who came up with that law, wouldn't you pay to secure the life or lives of your family members? So anyway, the big concern is that these secret payments continue to fuel this industry. This is why these terrorists keep doing what they're doing, because they're funded. And, you know, I mean, according to these allegations at least, but these allegations, the reason some people might believe it is because, I mean, it's basically what people have suspected all along.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have a lot of thoughts here as well. I think you covered mostly everything. I think my biggest challenge with this is, you know, it seems pretty obvious that there had to be some kind of financial transaction because they were taken away on motorcycles and they were returned in like Sprinter vans. You know, I can't find any other explanation for why a group who would operate in such a way where they would just kidnap young children would return them without anything in return, right? Just a conversation. And so obviously there had to be some kind of other exchange that happened, especially to the point that you made about the 2 leaders being, you know, that were in captivities that were exchanged and returned. You know, I'm still not understanding why for all these years there have been Western military groups in these countries funding, training, all of these things. And these groups have only grown in power. These military groups, these military insurgent groups, terrorist groups, have only grown in size and power, and, you know, occupying more territory, getting bigger and bigger artillery. And I mean, if you see some of the videos, especially coming out of Nigeria with some of these guys, the machine guns, the artillery that they have, it is scary to see what they now have access to, you know? And yeah, to your point, I just can't, there is no easy explanation that is other than nefarious that would explain why these guys have been able to grow in all the ways that I mentioned earlier. Why the countries to the north have all had military takeovers is large in part to do with this issue. And I know that this is a fear of, you know, Some government officials in Nigeria, some have mentioned they don't, they disapprove of military rule in other countries. But these are the kind of reasons why it ends up happening. People get fed up with children being kidnapped from schools and from being attacked in churches and mosques and all of these things that keep happening. So yeah, I hope to see a dramatic shift. And I don't know what that would take. I don't know if maybe just seeing the example to their north with, Niger and, Burkina Faso and Mali and what they're doing, maybe we'll see some shift in strategy based on what those guys are doing. At the very least, Ghana is working on some things because they border with Burkina Faso, right? And so, Burkina Faso and Ghana signed those 7 different deals, and there's some treaties in place. So if we could see someone from the traditional ECOWAS bloc sign a deal with folks from the AES, I hope that operates as an example for future leaders. Because I don't know, the current leaders don't seem to be interested, but maybe future leaders in the ECOWAS bloc to follow suit. And let's see how this improves the situation for the everyday citizens, because that's who's really impacted mostly, is the people who have nothing to do with any of the political issues and situations that are happening on the ground. They're just living their everyday lives, and their lives are disrupted by these people. Okay, with that being said, we will move on from Nigeria and on to East Africa, where Uganda has stepped into the center of a political firestorm as President Museveni apparently has attempted to broker peace in Sudan, according to their side of the story. Despite being appointed by the African Union to mediate, Museveni's recent meeting with the RSF chief, only with the RSF chief, has drawn fierce condemnation from the Sudanese army. So also known as the SAF. So the SAF basically views high-level receptions as a dangerous move to legitimize a paramilitary force recently accused by the UN of committing acts of genocide in Darfur. I'm just going to play this video and we'll have some commentary on the other side. Sorry, one moment. Let me get back to this.
Meeting at President Yoweri Museveni's home in Entebbe has angered the Sudanese army. Now, the head of Sudan's rival paramilitary, the RSF, met with Museveni last week. He is Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, more commonly known as Hemedti. Now, Museveni has been appointed by the African Union to mediate between the 2 rival camps. Sudan has been locked in a war between the army and the paramilitary since April of 2023. After the meeting, Museveni posted pictures on X and emphasized a peaceful political situation in Sudan. During his visit, Dagalo called for Africa-led mediation.
From the first day of the war, we said negotiations must be African. Peace should be made in Africa. Intergovernmental Authority on Development and the African Union.
Now, this was Dagalo's second meeting with the Ugandan president. Now, the first was in December of 2023 during a regional tour when the RSF chief reportedly attempted to seek legitimacy from African leaders. The RSF chief's latest meeting with Museveni came a week after the Ugandan president hosted Sudanese army chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan's deputy. The Sudanese army has slammed Kampala for hosting the RSF chief, calling it an insult to humanity.
So, your thoughts, Gloria, on this meeting between Museveni and the RSF chief?
Oh boy. So the Berbera port is a very important part of this conversation, the port and the airstrip in Berbera. And the Red Seas, and Joe, I think you've shown the map and explained things regarding that region. But the Red Seas increasingly volatile. So Somaliland is now offering the United States the use of its Berbera port and airstrip, just like that, you know? And we also need to really focus on that location of that Berbera port and airstrip. It's actually across the Gulf of Aden from Yemen, and it's already seen significant investment from the UAE. At the end of the day, it's all about diplomatic recognition. You know, Somaliland has operated as a de facto independent state since 1991, but it's still been unrecognized by the UN, the AU, and crucially and ironically, the US government. So this offer to the US is heavily influenced by a major diplomatic breakthrough that happened in late 2025, with Israel becoming the first UN member state to formally recognize Somaliland. And Prime Minister Netanyahu actually described it as being in the spirit of the Abraham Accords. Of course, people had reservations about this recognition from Israel. And reports are actually also indicating or suggesting that Somaliland has also offered Israel mineral rights and potential military space, which is heightening tensions with the federal government of Somalia. Now, during a press conference in August of 2025, Trump suggested that his administration was working on the Somaliland issue. And even though he has since downplayed an immediate move to match Israel's recognition of Somaliland, Somaliland believes that this deal actually fits, you know, Trump's whole policy of putting America first. And they're just basically giving him the, you know, the language that he loves, the things he likes to hear. We're going to give America access, like, bro. But anyway, the government of Somalia did attempt to actually block Somaliland's momentum by also offering to renew its own 1980 agreement that actually grants the US access to Somali ports and airports. So, I mean, because even though on one hand they're arguing that any deal involving Berbera without their consent is legally void, they're also offering, like, come take our minerals. They're so shiny, you know. I would never understand it. Of course, there's been a lot of condemnation. Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, they think this is affecting the territorial integrity of Somalia, and, you know, it's going to hurt regional stability. At the end of the day, it's the same thing we keep saying. We have all these minerals, which make all these countries interested in us, even the ones that are siding with Somalia from outside the continent. These countries are interested because we know what we have, but clearly our leaders do not know. The citizens know what they have, but our leaders, they know, they just forget. They don't understand the power of negotiation. They don't understand the power of leverage. And, you know, we can say it's all games, you need partners. But as I've always said, if you must go outside the continent, get people who historically have proven that they have our interests at heart. America is one country that has labeled Africa with so much, America has painted Africa with such a bad brush. And here we are offering all our resources. We have people at the White House, presidents, leaders, going to the White House and, you know, oh, take all my minerals, please, Trump, take my, like, I don't understand it. One day, Africa will have leaders who understand our power and who learn to put Africa first. The ones we had throughout history, we know what happened to them. But we will get back to that time. I only pray that I see that in my lifetime.
Absolutely. And by the way, I know it's my fault. I went out of order in the stories. I know we just talked about Somaliland and the deal with Trump. So we should cover that, and then we can get back to the story of Museveni meeting with the RSF. But just specifically on this story, yeah, I mean, look, I think one of the biggest challenges I see on the continent of Africa, as we've mentioned many times before, is looking to the West and other places for assistance for whatever it is that we're looking for. And what ends up happening is you end up giving away something that your people need in order to get a result that you never actually want, right? And so it almost always never actually results in a net benefit for the people or the country that's originating with something like this. So yeah, I mean, to that point, there was a video. So just to give some context to what Gloria was just mentioning, I'll play a little bit from this video, and then we'll go back to the Sudan story right after this. Let me play this video and then we'll go back.
My apologies, y'all. I jumped ahead of myself.
No worries, no worries. I actually played the stories out of order. So
Okay.
let me share this story, and then we'll focus on this for now, and then we'll get back to the other one shortly. Let me know if you guys can hear this in the comments.
Hello and welcome. Our top story today is from the Horn of Africa. Somalia's breakaway region of Somaliland has been seeking international recognition for over 3 decades now. Back in December, Israel became the first country to recognize it, and now it is seeking recognition from Israel's top ally, the US. Somaliland is willing to make an offer to the United States. The offer includes exclusive access to Somaliland's minerals and military bases.
Our friends, if it's Israel or the United States, explore the potential of minerals that we have, particularly the rare earth and the strategic minerals, in which we know are becoming very important for the United States. And as the president said, we are willing to give exclusive also to the United States. Also, we are open to offer military bases to the United States.
Last year, when Israel recognized Somaliland, it received backlash from Somalia, the African Union, the European Union, and the Arab world. Only the US backed Israel's move, and the UAE, which has deep ties with Somaliland, chose not to condemn it. Now, earlier this month, Somaliland's president also said that the territory is willing to offer Israel privileged access to its mineral resources, and the possibility of Israel setting up a military base in the region has not been ruled out.
All right, so to the point you made before, Gloria, right, about the idea of the access to the ocean, just for those who, you know, sometimes we do use these maps to kind of help people get a view of what we are looking at here. As you can see on, let me actually add it to the stage here. So as you can see here, Somalia is here, Somaliland is here. Right. And so, you know, this obviously is a very important trade route. All of this is. And so Somalia is opposed to Somaliland becoming its own independent state. But as you can see, United States and Israel having a strategic position in East Africa is one of the many concerns that you are hearing, especially in this video. So what was concerning to me was not even just a trade deal. What you heard there was exclusive access to the rare earths, and also offering a military basis. I do understand a country wanting its independence. I do understand that. And I don't know enough about Somalia and Somaliland's internal challenges and internal politics around the want and need for Somaliland to become an independent nation. And the long fight, right? Since 1991, they officially recognized themselves as an independent nation, as you mentioned earlier. I think the challenge that I see here is by doing so, you just become you become basically a puppet of someone else. Multiple someone else's. And it will not end up going well for Somaliland. I mean, I understand they want their independence, but you cannot give up that much to someone else. I mean, you see what happens when other countries do the same thing. You know, when some groups start giving up natural resources and or control, you know, I mean, you see what happened in Libya, you know, it is not a good idea. I mean, it's not a good idea. I won't get into all the issues I have with who specifically they're talking about giving this control to, but just in general, bad idea. to give over all your resources to a single entity, and then also allow them to put military bases there. It just never works out for your country. Never does. And so, you know, I would hope that there could be some kind of resolution found between Somalia and Somaliland, but it just feels like they're going further and further apart by the partners, you know, Somaliland is choosing to potentially partner with, who of course is probably offering substantial financial benefit, right? At least promising it. Execution of it, I don't know, but at least there are a lot of promises. And so I think Gloria gave a lot of great insight into the background and why, you know, it's obviously concerning. And so, yeah, it is a very, very concerning thing. And we will see what happens. We will see what happens in the coming months, but I just hope that this deal does not go through. Okay, so we are at time. I realize it's we ran a little bit over today. There were a couple of stories that we also wanted to talk about. You know, briefly, I don't know if you have any commentary on Museveni from Uganda meeting with the RSF chief, and then maybe we can kind of touch on one more story before we go.
Yeah, I apologize that I completely missed the intro on that because I was busy multitasking. Just a little bit because my kiddo is home today. But regarding the Museveni Emeti meeting, I mean, we're not surprised. I don't know if you were surprised. I wasn't surprised. You have one illegitimate government hanging out with another illegitimate government, and Museveni saying that, you know, this was necessary to help with, you know, resolving the issues going on in Sudan. No, bro, we need you to condemn what these people are doing to the people of Sudan. Have you not seen the videos? You know, but I mean, you being the mediator is, I mean, I guess, thank you for doing all you can, but it was just not good optics at all. It was giving a support of a government that is unaliving people, you know, with the support of, you know, we've had reports of the UAE's involvement and all that. So you getting involved, I would absolutely distance myself and try to mediate from afar. But even with you, Museveni, we need people to come mediate your governance in Uganda. It's been what, since 1986? How long has it been, Joe? 4 decades exactly this year. And that's why you have people in the streets protesting. Oh, I kind of digressed, didn't I? We have people in the streets protesting. You're 40 years in power, Museveni. I don't think we need you mediating anything just yet. That's my thoughts on that, Joe.
Yeah, I always wonder how the African Union makes decisions on who mediates certain things. So that's one question I have, and I'm just, you know, just being frank, I just don't understand why they decided and who they decided. That's one, and maybe
they need mediating too. But go on.
Yeah, right, and you know, maybe they have a process we're just not clear about. So that's one, and I think two, the other challenge that I have with this is, you know, yeah, as you mentioned, condemning what the RSF has been doing. We've seen the videos, right? I mean, it is some of the worst atrocities I think I've ever seen, from what you can consider a war. I don't even know if you can call it a war. Whatever it is, it's just it's an atrocity. Now, when it comes to negotiating between two parties, you cannot do it without the two parties in the same room. I don't know why these kinds of negotiations happen, where you negotiate with one party this way, and then you negotiate with this party this way. I do understand that because of the level of unalivings that have happened, it may be difficult for two groups to meet. I do understand that. And I do understand that it probably requires all kinds of security measures and requirements in terms of you can only bring one bodyguard, they have to be patted down, no arms when they step into a room and meet, all the things that you would have to do. But you have to have them talk to each other. And there has to be the ability for the two to discuss, because they're not talking now. They're only fighting in other ways. And look, there are probably some people in the country that support RSF. Most people probably don't, because of what's happening to civilians, innocent civilians. But it doesn't mean that the people also are supporting the current administration as well, right? So I think the two need to come together and at least have a conversation to kind of talk through the specifics of some kind of process to get to a ceasefire and eventual end. And I don't know what that looks like. I can't pretend to know what that looks like, but I do know that you can't get a resolution by playing telephone game. It can't be, okay, this person told me this, so now I'm telling you. You know, it has to be the two talking to each other directly. I mean, that is the point of a mediation, right? Like if you think about mediations in any country, when it's a court mediation, any kind of mediation, you have the two parties in the room. Many times the mediator will leave and say, you guys try to come up with a solution together. I'll come back and hear what you've discovered. Other times they sit and they have a framework for how the conversation will go. I just don't understand why that is not happening. And to the points that everyone's making, right? One side is being funded by one group, the other side is being funded by another group. You know, these two need to be speaking with each other. I don't know if the people funding them need to be speaking as well. That's another whole nother conversation. But you know, you're not going to come to a resolution when you're meeting with just one, especially with smiles, handshaking, and photo ops, and the news taking pictures after we've seen the atrocities that they've made. It's just not. It's not helping to advance any real conversation. So it really is unfortunate because, you know, we have said we want Africans to resolve African problems, but we'd also prefer to see it done in a way that actually leads to a resolution, not further amplifies what already are the issues that we see in place. I mean, we've already seen the backlash from it because, you know, that's one of the things that I don't know how much people are aware of this, right? But the idea of legitimizing something, if a head of state meets with a group, generally, especially when you have a red carpet rollout, shaking hands, smiling, and taking photo shoots with them, that legitimizes them, right? Especially when it separates them from the atrocities that they're doing, right? So the videos that we're talking about, we can't show here because of YouTube guidelines, but we've described them and discussed them previously. You can go back and watch the videos where we talked about them, some of the videos that we've seen from some of those RSF soldiers and what they've been doing.
So some of those videos are on both of our pages, by the way.
On Instagram, right?
Yeah.
So those videos are on Instagram. Instagram's a little bit more lenient with the kind of videos you can play. We can't show them on YouTube. So you can check out, you know, it's hard to search there, but you can find them. So they're there. We've posted those videos so that you can understand what's actually happening. From the outside world, what Museveni has done is, by the argument of legitimizing them is the problem that people are having with them, and we have with this as well, is you see he's wearing a suit, right? He's been able to make a statement. So it separates him from the acts of his army, right? And so, yeah, I mean, this is really, really unfortunate, and it saddens me to see that, you know, there was kind of like this almost like a diplomatic, you know, receiving of him as if he was, you know, someone who is not, you know, committing these kinds of atrocities. Anyway, we'll keep following the story and we'll keep you guys posted as time goes on. We just wanted to give our thoughts on that particular story. Can
I just add?
Yeah, please.
I'm sorry, Joe. Paul Biya's family has had to flee Uganda. Justice for them. Justice for Bobby Wine. Not Paul Biya. I said Paul Biya because somebody made a joke about Museveni, Paul Biya, and Tinubu being in a room. But anyway, Bobby Wine, the strong opposition leader against Museveni, his family has had to flee Uganda for their safety. Justice for Bobby Wine, justice for his entire family, justice for the people of Uganda.
Absolutely. And to that point, if you guys don't remember, there was a recent election. So to what Gloria has mentioned is Museveni has now been in power almost as long as I've been alive. I was 2 when he took over.
It's not funny, guys. Please, sometimes I laugh just because of the absurdity. Like, I cannot imagine that any human on earth would reason like these people do, you know? Well, anyway.
Yeah. It is a sad state of affairs. I have a friend who's in Uganda, you know, who tries to keep me posted on the local happenings, and you know, the people really wanted Bobby Wine. I mean, it's palpable. You could tell, you could feel it, but obviously the people didn't get what they wanted. And yeah, Museveni again in power, and then of course the AU, excuse me, the AU puts him in charge of the negotiations between the rival camps in Sudan. Okay, so there was another story that we wanted to cover. We are over time, but just really quickly, I guess I can give some background. And then, you know, I don't know, Gloria, if you want to go through some of the other stories when I jump, but really quickly, Nigeria and South Africa has seen a rise in, you know, cryptocurrency payments. You know, Africa is leading the global spending in what they're calling stable coins. Nigeria and South Africa at the forefront. A recent survey, so this is a survey, revealed that many use stable coins for daily purchases, driven by failing financial systems. In Nigeria, 62% spend stable coins for everyday expenses, while 50% in South Africa do the same. Now, this is from a survey, so you can't really speak to the entire country. It's only those who were surveyed and responded to those surveys. So let's be very clear. Those numbers are probably very inflated. The preference for stablecoin payments is strong, with 95% of Nigerians, of course, from the same survey, favoring them over local currency. Stablecoins offer stability and ease of conversion, cutting costs for cross-border payments. Nonetheless, there are concerns about potential digital dollarization, which might undermine local currencies and regulatory frameworks. So there was a lot there, a lot of words and phrases that people may not be clear and understand. So maybe let me play some of this video, and then we'll maybe have some more commentary on the other side, because that was a lot there. So let me just play this video. Sorry, I actually lost the screen share. Okay, okay, we're up.
The world treats cryptocurrencies like a risky investment. Millions across Africa are using it to buy bread, pay for subscriptions, and run their businesses. A new report says that Africa is now leading the world in spending digital dollars, also known as stablecoin. Now, the survey examined financial patterns of 4,650 individuals across 15 countries who either hold or plan to hold the digital currency. At the heart of this revolution are the continent's two giants, Nigeria and South Africa. In these countries, stablecoins are being used for everyday payments. So what exactly is a stablecoin? A stablecoin is a type of cryptocurrency linked to the US dollar. One digital coin equals one real dollar. Unlike Bitcoin, its price does not swing wildly. Users can store digital dollars on their phones, and they do not need a US bank account. Now, unlike other regions where people hold these coins for years, people in Africa are spending them quickly. In Nigeria, 62% of users say that they use stablecoins for daily expenses. In South Africa, about half say the same. So why is adoption moving faster here than anywhere else? Because in many places, the traditional financial system is struggling.
Now that speaks to what we had spoken about earlier, right? About the idea of, you know, currencies in inter-country currency trading, or utilizing of, you know, a business across country lines on the continent. And then within the country, these coins are being used. And again, as you remember, we talked about earlier, every day we'd ask, what's the dollar rate? Like when you're on the continent, you don't realize, especially in West Africa, I can't speak for everywhere. I heard this also when I was in Tanzania, but the conversation always is like, what's the dollar rate today? Especially in certain countries where the currency fluctuates, because whenever you're doing any business, it's always based on the dollar. So with these stable coins, it's a similar process. So anyway, your thoughts on this, Gloria?
I mean, just very quickly, I'm not necessarily very big on crypto. I'm not really a fan of it. But I do understand, the necessity. And, when you have a continent where, unfortunately, there's challenge with the Naira, for instance, I can speak to the Naira. In Nigeria, it fluctuates. Today it's 1,500 to $1, which is high. I think right now it's in the 1,300s range. And, like you said, you wake up, you're like, what is the dollar rate today? What's the dollar rate today? Because that drives everything. It is nice to be able to have alternatives. But at the end of the day, the dollar is still somehow in the conversation. It's still in the background. And I guess we'll just keep our eye out on this one. But I can't see why governments would be concerned about this. But at the end of the day, if you do right by your people, they wouldn't be driven to desperation and looking for alternate solutions just to survive.
100%. And as you mentioned, look, I mean, it's called a stable coin because it's against the dollar, but the dollar is not always as stable as people think, right? So, I think a lot of the world's currencies are operating based on the US dollar, but the US dollar does have its issues and fluctuates as well because it's not backed by anything substantial like gold or any other precious metal. So because of that, the US dollar also over years and time actually fluctuates. And so the challenge with cryptocurrency is, and it was described here, a lot of times it's used as an investment, right, vehicle. Usually it's not used as for day-to-day transactions for most people as of yet. Most of the people who had used this historically had been operating using illicit means, right? So for non-legal activity, I would say, right? For example, Bitcoin lasted from 2012 all the way to 2014, 2015, 16 before the world started hearing about it because of a company called Silk Road, which was like Amazon for illicit activity. Most people couldn't even access it. There wasn't like a regular www dot. You had to go through some process to even find that website. And so cryptocurrency generally is not used day to day for most transactions around the world because it also is not stable. It's a speculative type of currency, right? It goes up and down in value pretty often. Now, because this one is backed to the dollar, people feel like it's more stable. So in any case, my initial thought is, I like to see people on the continent operating with more technology focused, technology first, and adopting new technologies because I think generally the world adopts new technologies. This seems out of necessity and also can have a negative impact. So although I see it's a good thing that people are adopting new technology, I think there are some challenges in how this technology can have an impact on the individual countries. I know we are over time. Yeah. Gloria, do you want to go through the stories, or should we bring this thing to a close? I have to jump. Okay. So
no worries. I can go through them very quickly.
Okay, cool. So I will leave it to you, Gloria, to go through the stories. I have to jump. But okay. Yeah, thanks everybody for watching. At the end, I'm sure Gloria will go through everything. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share this with anybody who cares about anything happening on the continent. So I will leave it to you, Gloria. Bye, guys.
Bye, Joe. Thank you. All right. So there's a big thing going on in Senegal, and Sovereign Media actually did a whole expose on it. They went into detail. Basically, 14 people allegedly linked to France were arrested due to having things to do with children in Senegal. And we've had this conversation repeatedly of people coming from outside the continent to come and exploit even children. We talked about the San community in Namibia a couple of months ago and how some British national was there, doing things that he had no business doing, taking photos of these children, just exposing them to so much vulnerability. And so Senegal's government, I do commend them for actually being on top of it. Another government that I would like to commend is South Africa, guaranteeing the return of 17 South African men who had been lured to fight on the Russian front lines. Last week, we talked about Nigeria, Kenya, and apparently now South Africa. You have people from throughout the continent who are in a state of desperation, and they reportedly were lured signing documents. They didn't even, because they weren't written in English, they were signing documents they had no idea about. Some of them thought they were going to do something else, and then they find themselves on the front line. Some have since lost their lives. But the South African government, shout out to Ramaphosa, he did get in contact with Vladimir Putin of Russia, and he was able to actually secure the release of 17 South African men. So yay to South Africa for that. What else is going on the continent? Mugabe's son in Zimbabwe, Mugabe's son actually got arrested in South Africa for a shooting incident. Basically shot someone in the back, and he's been in court for that. It's just, I guess, a very interesting case, and we'll keep our eye on that one. But you can research that if you have any interest in that. There is a very interesting report that has come out on sub-Saharan Africa having the largest Christian population in the world. I just thought that would be a very interesting one to share with you guys. Make of it what you will. But that is, I think, extremely interesting and very ironic, at the same time. Let's talk about what's going on in Niger. So there's been a discovery. Some dinosaur has been discovered in Niger. Spinosaurus mirabilis has been found in Niger. I do remember the Nigerian government, as you know, they're part of the AES. I think sometime last year, talking about how anything, these fossils, all these resources, minerals, whatever is discovered on our soil should remain on our soil. We should profit off of that. You know what I mean? We should benefit from that. So now that they've made this huge discovery, I mean, it might seem not that important, but these are things that we're used to people taking away from the continent, putting them in all these museums. So I'm very excited about this discovery. And I'm even more excited that there's a government in town. There's a new government, which is the Nigerian government, that will ensure that everything stays in Niger. I look forward to that. But I think that's all. That's basically all the news around Africa. I do want to thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for your comments. Dory F8CK. I don't know how I'm supposed to pronounce that. Sorry, but I do appreciate all the comments you've shared throughout. Thank you all so much. Somebody said like, share, subscribe. Okay, it was you, Dory. I do appreciate that. I do appreciate you sharing that. But thank you all so much for your wonderful insights. I wish we could go through all the comments. I don't want to start mentioning names so I don't leave some people out, but don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We do this every weekday, Thursdays at 10 a.m. I'm sorry, I have to do the conversion. It's 10 a.m. Eastern time. And then if we're looking at West African time, that will be 4 p.m. So we do this every single Thursday. Make sure you keep liking, sharing, and subscribe. If you're not following me, my handle is @TheGloriaAyo throughout on every single platform. And Joe's handle is @Authentic African. Some of it is a little different, but if you just type in Authentic African, you'll see him everywhere. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next week. Have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.